Allie, co-founder of PotomacBeads. Today's Better Beader episode, we are going to talk about 1 versus 2 needle in a number of different stitches, focusing on raw or right angle weave stitch. There are benefits and there are drawbacks to both, and I hope to discuss those with you and that way give you an idea of which direction you want to start out with in learning or perfecting the right angle weave. So if you're first learning out how to do right angle weave, you're going to look at some of these different things like the round duo embellished and the Royal Matters and also the breaking waves bracelet, and they're going to be a little bit overwhelming to you. There is diagonal stitch, which is actually 2 needles that I've done a YouTube video on and I've taught so many different times. I find it easier if people have no desire to kind of really move on from beading past a simple strung bracelet or past a nice easy necklace. That 2 needles, although it seems confusing, is the way to go when teaching people how to do right angle weave. Many of you watching already know that right angle weave is a collection of little boxes, or they're based on groups of 4. So you can see those 4 beads right there in that Royal Matters. There are 4 sides to each right angle weave unit. When you start out with 2 needles, one of the things you get to do right away is stick on your clasp. So say I'm using a faceted table cup button here, I can stick 1 needle up one side, 1 needle up the other, and get ready, and my needle and thread and my clasp are already there. When I get in then to start the right angle weave, and when you're doing 2 needle, you are going to have beads where it has 1 bead that goes through right to left, the other left to right. This bead in particular is going to have 2 strands of thread through it. That starter bead. Once you have that starter bead on your thread and you've taught people how to crisscross through, you're then going to put on your right and your left beads, or the sides of your little right angle weave box or your raw box. When you're doing 2 needle, the boxes or the sides are only going to get 1 strand going through each side. You put the 4th bead or the top of the box on and you crisscross through that bead. Now those of you that have not done right angle weave and are watching, this seems very simple. All you do then again is add a bead to the right, add a bead to the left, and cross through the middle. If you do want to embellish right away, say you have a Monty, you have 2 pieces of thread that you can kind of cross through beads, zigzag around beads, and the other one is there. When you are doing 1 needle in right angle weave, so if I switch from 2 to 1, and I get my 2 side beads out here, you're going to notice that there's 2 amounts of thread through different areas. So again, my red beads in my first initial have 2 threads going through them. At this point, switching to 1 needle, I have my side bead, my top bead, my other side bead, and I'm going to circle back through the bead the thread was coming out of. What this is going to do is it's going to put a 2nd strand through the original thread, and then I'm going to also need a 2nd strand going through the side and a 2nd strand going through the top. So 1 needle right angle weave is actually going to use more thread than 2 needles. That's an advantage and a disadvantage. It's going to have every other bead where you're going to have 2 pieces of thread actually going through the side beads as well. So you'll have 2 threads on this side bead on the right, then on the next right angle unit, left, right, as you circle around. So is one better than the other? Not necessarily. Is one easier to do than the other? Not necessarily. I think one is easier to teach by far to use 2 needles. However, you do make your right angle weave a little bit tighter. However, it can make it go a little bit waved if you're not a great beader. So check out some of the videos if you are learning right angle weave, how to do with 2 needles, like that diagonal stitch bracelet, and then work into the 1 needle. Once you go into 1 needle, anytime you're going to go with multiple rows of the right angle weave, or you're going with multiple different sizes, I always find it easiest to work with 1 needle. Once you master the 1 needle, then you can move on to learning crawl or circular right angle weave as well. So when you're doing that, I often find, again, it's easiest to learn how to do this with 2 needles because it's not mind-boggling to take your needles from the right and the left and kind of fold them over to make a little circle or make a box. I have lots of videos on doing that. So to answer kind of the question of whether or not right angle weave 1 needle or 2 needle uses more thread, One needle is actually going to use more thread than two needles. It, however, makes it a little bit more tighter, and working with that one needle allows you to put your clasp on right away without having to tie any knots. At the very end, it also allows you to go back and do a loop or put the other side of the clasp on and tie those two threads together to end the project. If you are embellishing the right angle weave, you want to keep in mind that sometimes it is easier again to use those two needles if you're embellishing while you're making. As you become better at it and it's easier to work with, check out using just one needle. Most projects that I do and I say and will present with two needles, I usually say as well, this can be done with one needle. Keep that in mind for those of you that are more advanced. When it comes to different stitches also, whether or not to use one or two needles, peyote stitch I'm always going to use one needle. However, check out the video for odd count peyote using the two needle methods. When doing odd count, I think it's so much easier to work through and use two needles. Same with the herringbone stitch, the Zoli Duo herringbone. You can check that video out as well to do one needle versus two needles in the herringbone stitch. If you want the sides to match down the herringbone, then you want to check out using two needles because it becomes much easier. When you search on the YouTube channel for the different stitches, check out a number of different videos, especially with those multi-hole beads or the single hole, to figure out whether or not you like the idea of using one or two needles when making your projects. Also keep in mind, if you're not used to using two needles, then you take a little bit of time to get used to kind of becoming ambidextrous and using both hands to string your beads. Advantages mainly, again, with that two needles, you're using less thread, and you're also able to put your clasp or your finding on right away. It's also, I think, the easiest method and the easiest way to teach that series of figure eights and how the beads need to be positioned in that right angle weave. The two needles versus the one needle then. The one needle is going to use a little bit more thread. However, you are able to get the stitch a little bit tighter. Sometimes it's harder to embellish with one needle. You have to go through more beads than it is two. But the two needle also allows you to branch out and add on more rows when you're working with it. The two needle also is going to make it a little bit stiffer since you do have two pieces of thread going through. That can be an advantage or a disadvantage depending on how much embellishing you're going on top of the piece. Just like in the Royal Matters pendant and piece, when you're looking at it, how many times you're going around and embellishing the top of that simple peyote stitch is going to affect how you are actually making and working with the right angle weave. When it comes to the different right angle weaves and the peyote stitch and the herringbone stitch, I usually recommend that the teacher used one or two needles for the stitch for a specific reason. If you're not sure exactly and you're looking at a pattern or you're watching a video, make sure to send a little email or a little message to the instructor or to the pattern designer to ask them that question and to clear that up for you. Chances are they used one over the other for a very specific reason that may not have just been explained. You can put your comments below this YouTube video whether or not you like working with one or two needles, what you find easiest about both options, and what you like better, one or the other. Keep in mind also you can give a little thumbs up to this YouTube channel. You can watch all these Better Beader episodes as well as subscribe to us here. Remember also to check out PotomacBeads.com as well as .eu if you need any supplies. So to venture on and to continue the needle debate, here's kind of me weighing in on that one versus two needles. Thanks so much for watching, everybody, and happy beading.